Good afternoon and welcome to the SCOTGOLD Resources Limited investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives in the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and will publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Phil Day, CEO. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to another webinar. Seems like this is our third one this year. Hopefully this is positive for the people in listening. We've got some really interesting information to spread and to reinforce this particular time that we haven't probably had in the last couple of times. So hopefully this is an enjoyable experience for everyone, and we get some really interesting questions, because we do really appreciate the feedback from our investors, and we appreciate our investors fully. And so the more sort of interaction and questions we get, it's just the better it is for all of us. So here we go. So as we talked about last time, SCOTGOLD Resources 22 to 23, production and explorer growth is the name of the game for us. Now, just bear with me while I move the slides. So as we talked about last time, 2021 was the year that we just had to have, as is very common the case in mining companies. They end construction, and there's always this phase between commissioning and ramp up that sometimes takes longer than is anticipated. But 2021 was our year that we embedded in our systems as best as we could. We trained as many people and employed as many people as we possibly could, and we ramped up. Along that way, we experienced a few hiccups, as we had discussed in our RNSs several times through the year, but we completed 2021 in a healthy state. We got the company to a position where our operating revenue was starting to exceed our operating cash, which was great, we went straight into 2022 on that basis. In 2022, in the first quarter, as we announced in the AGM, we again had to go through a period or a quarter of development in the actually underground mine itself, to enable it to open up. The process plant at that particular stage was the front of the mine. It was starting to show signs that it was becoming quite consistent and stable, but the mine itself had to do some development. So we did that through quarter one, and then that enabled us to access these stoping areas. Stoping areas, once again, as I discussed in the last webinar, is the area where you get a lot more tons of the ore itself at the grade that you like. In our particular case, because we're a very high grade gold mine, our gold grade that we send to the process plant can be up to 20 to sometimes up into 30 grams per ton, and on average over quarter two of this year, it averaged around 20 grams per ton. So that is a direct result of the work we did in Q1 to get through and develop and get through into these stoping areas. And as I talked about in several webinars before, you'll hear me talk more and more about stoping. There's different types of stoping methodologies. Currently, we are just doing cut and fill stoping, but our long-term goal is to actually get into long hole stoping, and that is where we'll start to actually get much better, bang for your buck, or dollars per ton of material, because it's just a far more effective and efficient method of mining. So Q2, we announced that about 4, 5, 6, 7 days ago. And as we stated previous to the end of the quarter, and again in that RNS, we actually exceeded our guidance, which means that we actually went better than we expected. We accessed areas of the stope. The stope kept giving. The geology proved itself to be quite wonderful and quite predictable based on our grade control model. Our process plant was working in the areas sometimes in the 90 pluses, sometimes for consecutive days at 100% availability, which means as soon as you start stope mining, you put it into the truck, you send it straight down to the ROM, straight into the process plant, and then it goes straight through and then into concentrate bags. We saw some very, very high numbers in our bags, up into the thousands of grams per ton of gold. So this was unusual for us. We thought on average it would be around about the 200, and so this was extremely pleasing quarter. because it enabled us to get around about £5 million of revenue into the bank, which means that for the very first time we announced that we're in commercial production at the end of that quarter. It's a significant milestone for SCOTGOLD because it was never been in this position ever before. So it is now an operating entity that is making cash. We do obviously have a lot of people to pay back, our debt providers and investors and the like, but at least we are now making cash. It's a big, big step for us. So this is all underpinned by our overall strategy. Overall strategy is to optimize the value of CONONISH, which is we're still in the middle of, and we are now going into this growth of regional and explorational material, which I'll talk at the back end of this presentation. And this is all underpinned by the people and commitment to sustainability that we adhere to so well. What I mean by that is, even though we're a mining company, we obviously operate in the national parks. We must do it in a sustainable manner to the best of our ability. We are held to a much higher standard than others around the world because of the situation in which we are, which means that when we have any incidents or anything that occurs, we have to respond to those in a quicker fashion. We have systems and engineering protocols, but also we rely on our people, which evidently have been working quite well and hard at this to make sure that every time anything does actually become untoward, if it ever does become untoward, that means, then people respond to it in a professional and an efficient manner. We still have a couple more things to go to be able to say that we are, the standout ESG mine in the world, and that being we want to connect up to the power in the Scottish grid, which would mean that we would be using power from hydro, renewable sources, so hydro and wind. But for the moment, we operate in a plant that uses dry stack tailings, which we talked about last time, which is a big step forward in technology in mining around the world. It means that we don't have eyesore waste dumps. We don't have big piles of these massive tailings storage dams, as they call it, that in other countries of the world have collapsed and caused all sorts of environmental problems. So we just do not have that, and that was a really wonderful decision by the board and the construction people at the time to put that in place. It was very difficult, and it still is a very difficult part of the process to operate, but it's a commitment that we stand by to make sure that we are a sustainable and environmentally friendly mine. We do not use cyanide chemicals as well as a lot of other gold companies around the world do, which again is a huge feather in our cap. It just means that there is absolutely no possible way we'll have any discharge of any dangerous chemical like cyanide because we just don't use it. So best method of control is just to eliminate the need. Right. Again, as I alluded to, this is only possible because of the people that we have at SCOTGOLD. We operate within a country that just doesn't have mining as a what would you say, as a major employer of people. So as a result, we have had to do a significant amount of recruitment and a significant amount of training. And so from April of 2021 to now, we've gone from in the order of about 10 employees up to about 89. Obviously, some contractors and like on top of that. We still have further growth in that area to go, but we are dedicated to the safety of our people and the environments. And as a result, we've had 414 days of zero reportable incidents under the mines regulations terminology. And that is all because we have rigorous H&S training programs. But so this is a real good feather in the cap to the people that we employ, that they have taken on the safety standard, the safety culture, which may not have been normal to a lot of the people that we employ, but they've taken it on. They've taken it well. Again, we're not saying we're perfect, but it's a real good sign that you're able to run a mine like we do in an environmentally sensitive area and with the amount of people that we brought on, and just not have massive issues to contend with. Right, getting into who we are, as we talked about again. Sorry for repeating a few things, but I just think it's a good thing to just repeat and go forward with. But we are a very high-grade gold mine with high margins. We have proven and probable resources in the order of about, well, at the end of the day, close to 300,000 ounces. I'll talk at the back end of this presentation how we believe we'll be able to increase that through some exploration. Why that's significant? Because if we can extend that and get into, say, the 500,000 up to 1 million, it means that we just become a much bigger player, or compared to our peers, a normal player. At the moment, we are considered a small gold mine, but we are a high revenue gold mine. We are a highly profitable gold mine once we actually get through this phase 1 and up into phase 2. And that is because of the geology that we have on this mine. It's exceptionally high grade, and it enables us to have a predicted revenue going forward once we finish phase 2 growth of in the order of about 24 million pounds per annum based on the current gold price. So let's talk more about what we have. So at the mine itself, or the Cononish vein as we call it, being a high-grade gold mine, we are able to process it through an on-site processing facility right next to the porthole mine itself. So that means that as we dig it, we drill, we blast, and we put into the back of trucks and then send down the process plant. What we'll need to do is simply crush, mill, float, or gravity separate, and then dry stack the tails themselves. So relatively simple, but effective. Okay, position for growth. So we talked about this at the beginning of the year, that in Q1 was going to be a predictably low producing quarter because we were doing a significant amount of development in the mine at that time. Then we were going into Q2, where because we were accessing some of the higher grade areas that were enabling us to stope, we predicted that we would be producing in the order of about 3,200 ounces. As we stated in our RNS, though, we actually achieved 3,500 ounces. So that just meant that we went better than we performed or expected. Then we entered into Q3, which is predictably more lumpy. The reason being is, again, we're doing some more development. We're doing some more expansion of our power and ventilation in the underground, which will enable us, again, to just mine at faster rates. But as we're doing that, it means sometimes we have access to certain areas. Sometimes we have to do more development. It's, again, just part and parcel of mining. But this is all because now we're pushing into Q4. And as you can see, with operating revenue that we just said that we achieved in Q2 of 5 million, we'll go through Q3 with probably a similar sort of revenue. But look at Q4. Look at Q4 stands. With that amount of gold coming in, if gold price stays high as it is, it means our revenue will simply just go higher. Okay, so Q2, probably haven't talked about this enough, but significant big milestone for us because we exceeded our targets. So we achieved 3,531 ounces, which is what, 188% increase compared to Q1 of 2022. And that was because we just did the work in Q1 to set things up, do the developing tunnels, get into this cut and fill. Our miners were able to just go and transition straight from a developed tunnel to this cut and fill method. They did all sorts of wonderful learnings from the previous cut and fill by putting things like chains and whatnot on tires to get much better wear rates out of tires, or better mean time between failures on tires. So took those lessons and went straight into the cut and fill 2, and hey presto, we had 5 million of revenue, that amount of gold. We went straight into commercial production. I said we got to 400, but we actually got some bags that actually went a lot higher than that as from a concentrate perspective. We mined about 5,000 odd tons, just over 5,000 tons, and it averaged 19 grams per ton. So these are all wonderful metrics. Okay, so, but this is not all we are. So if you have a look at these charts, they're effectively telling what we have done and what we believe we're going to be going to do going forward. But just again, as a snapshot, Q2 represented quite a big change for us compared to our others. But again, if I go back to the original chart, it's going to have more to come. Okay, some of the things that we did in order to achieve that is we did a significant amount of work to get our mining fleet working effectively. Now more days than not, we have in the 90s or 100% availability on our mining fleet. Our utilization is a bit lower because we're waiting for some of these projects to come through. But once you can get a mechanical equipment like that to work effectively, it just means you have much more high probability that you're going to be able to mine more efficiently. And the same thing as on a process plant. Again, through our training and operating and learning, about 4 or 5 months ago, the process plant might have been off for a day here or a day there, and we were sitting in the 60s and 70s from an availability point of view. But we put all these optimizational things in place, and again, now more often than not, we have 2 or 3 or 4 days in a row which just never turns off. So huge steps forward. Some of our systems work for ERP, just to make sure that we have computer-based systems. So working on the connectivity between, say, maintenance planning and warehousing and finance. We're still working on, because it's just an immense amount of work, and we'll just continually to update on that when that becomes completed. So next steps, though, once you've done some of the basics work and get things working well, and then it's time for growth. So for us, we are very clear on what that requires in the mine and on the process plant. And in the process plant, we understand that the back end of the process plant, more times than not, is the bottleneck. For the people that have operated that plant and been up on the tails filter itself, it can be a real pain. It's very difficult. It's very labor intensive. There's a lot of scraping and all that to be done. So we've gone out and made this investment on what's called a tails thickener. That is important because it will do a lot of dewatering and enable the tails filter itself to operate more effectively and more efficiently. And so therefore we'll be able to increase the process plant and also probably decrease the amount of work that we need to do to make it work. And then when the mine starts to stope even more with the long hole stoping, we'll be able to increase both the mine throughput and the process plant throughput. Then going further, once we have achieved that, going back to the graph, if you remember, the gold grade was going up, so the gold throughput was going up. Then we're heading towards phase 2, which we've always been talking about since day one at SCOTGOLD. Phase 2 is when we achieve 6,000 tons per month throughput in the mine, or mining rate, plus throughput capacity in the process plant. There's a few ways we can do this, but we did some test work on this device called an ore sorter, which again we talked about a few times previously. We believe this is the way forward. It is an effective machine that can sort out material prior to it being touched by the mill and flotation, like where we do add some sort of chemicals, which are not bad for the environment in any way, shape or form, but they technically are tails producing areas or circuit within the process plant. If we can remove that material prior to the mill and prior to flotation using this thing called an ore sorter, it enables us to produce rock that is potentially barren, and that way we can use it for all sorts of things that we want around the mine, depending on what we might need at any given time. Now, why that's important and how this could be effective is the last test results we got back prove that we could pretty much eliminate about 30 to 35% of mass, but achieve in the mid-90s from a recovery from gold. So that means we just get rid of the rock that we just don't need, that just doesn't have any gold in it prior to it being processed. So therefore our unit cost of anything that we do from a processing point downstream is just lower. And so this is just much more effective. So we are continuing on with the work. We have to be quite diligent. We have to do all sorts of variability test work to make sure that we are absolutely sure of this. And if we are, then we're going to go through with the money that we got from Fern Wealth back, as we announced in our last webinar. And we'll use that money to purchase this, and then we'll engineer it into the process plant and install it ready for the end of Q1 of 2023. And then when we get to that point, we'll be at phase 2 production. And as we talked about with our being such a high fixed cost mine, we'll just be increasing our revenue, keeping our costs pretty much as they are now. And like I said, that instantly transfers through to having much more revenue. So these are the numbers that we predict going through from phase 1 into the end of phase 2. So phase 1 was achieved way back in around about January, February time. But once we then got through into now this area that we're what we call like a transitional period, for a better word, we're achieving much higher rates of gold production. Sometimes we We have the throughput of the process plant that is just restricted because of the amount of gold that comes through, would you believe? But we have the capacity to run as we please at this moment. But moving forward into phase 2 is where the real money can be made. That is our aim and that's our objective through mine optimizational work, this thickener, and going through with the ore sorter. Right, so let me talk about the mine plan, because this is conceptually something that, unless you understand mining very, very well, can be a little bit confusing, but I'll do my best to explain as best as I can. So what the mine plan shows here in grey and in red, grey is areas that we have mined, red is the areas that we plan to mine. What this translates to is we focused on that grey area from the right all the way through to the left. That was the most diligent thing we could possibly do to open up both sides of the mine. Because as you can see where we've got this area called CAF 1 and CAF 3, we have one area there that's exceptionally high grade, and we have the same thing over in that other area that's called CAF 2. Now we believe even further over to the left, we've got that thing called 430 stope, that there might be some more over there. So we're going to do some more drilling, what's this called res dev drilling, not exploration drilling, just to be clear. And that is the sort of drilling that you do just to be clear as to where your gold is on a meter by meter basis, or even a foot by foot if you're talking empirical units, so that you understand and you can become far more predictive with the amount of gold and revenue that you'll be producing. Now, just to look at it in a different way, maybe this helps people to understand a bit more clearly. This is really, really important in mining to understand that the more development that you can do, the more you open up a mine, the more you can access areas once you understand it better, access the areas that require, so that you can know what gold grades you're going to be getting to the process plant at any given time. And that way you can start to forecast your revenues, and you can start to forecast your productions and forecast your ship movements, and then your business just becomes far more predictable. So repeating, the grey areas are what we've developed. The red areas is what we are developing for the rest of 22 to try to set us up for long hole stoping in 2023, as I depict over here on the left-hand side. Okay, so we've talked a lot about this phase 1, this transitional phase, going into phase 2 next year. And this is all based on the Cononish vein as we know it. As we have access to these areas, we have more often than not been pleased with the gold grades that we've seen. As I stated in Q2 RNS, we averaged 19.1 grams per ton, which is higher than our reserve grade. Reserve grade, if you remember, is about 11.9 or 12 grams. So we are very, very fortunate that the Cononish vein is just showing signs that it has got some very interesting areas of gold, and more than we thought. However, we're also much more interested, or we are significantly interested, to see how big this vein can be and how big other veins in and around this vein can actually be. So I'll show you this wonderful picture that we have had up a few other times. This is trying to show, to the best it possibly can, the vein itself at Cononish. I know it's not 100% clear, but basically the vein works like this, and there's all these drill holes that were put in originally to try to find where it is. What this also shows us is there's significant holes in our understanding, and they are not within their mine plan, but it could be reasonable to think that those areas actually do have gold in them as well. So if I look at it and highlight them with these circles, these are the areas that I'm talking about. So we plan to actually put some holes into those areas, and if we find more gold or the continuation of the gold vein, which is probable, then that means we can actually do some work and then add that to the resource, and then potentially the reserves, if we can access it through mining techniques that we currently do. And that way we just increase the life of the mine and just have more years of gold, and therefore more revenue and more money. So that is one part of our exploration program. The second part is we have the leases to 2,900 square kilometres of area in Scotland, which if you see this particular dot right here, that Cononish vein, that's the only bit that we're mining. That's the only bit that we really understand, but we have access to all of these areas. And we've been doing geo work for quite a number of years now, with not drilling, but we've been doing some field geo work, and it is showing that there is telltale signs of gold in and around our Cononishe vein principally. There is theories that we have about what the vein is doing and how it might have stepped across because of some faulting. And there's some very interesting areas right next to the vein that we would like to do some drilling. Now, if we are correct and our theory is correct with what we're seeing, this particular vein could be another Cononishe vein itself, which would, if it is true, then it will take our gold, our resource from the current 299 or round up to 300,000. It could potentially take it into the 500,000 or even higher, which is extremely exciting. Again, this is just another way to try to show the same thing. And I do apologize if these are not clear, but to geologists, these are very clear. Maybe this one's a better one to try to explain. So the vein itself, this is the Cononishe vein. The one I'm talking about is this one over here. It's got the same sort of signatures, evidently, of how Cononishe vein was found. Right, so just a recap. So we're in production, commercial production, that is. We actually achieved over guidance for the quarter. We did that through the amount of training and through employing of the people that we have, which is a real feather in their cap because of the way that they've been able to take on this training, be able to operate both the mine and the process plant in the manner that they do. It's now moving to an optimizational and growth area because we've achieved these availabilities, like I said before, more often than not in the high 80s or 90s, sometimes for many days, continuous operation without even having one shut down. Once you've got to that point, it's a good platform for growth. So that is what we've done. We've made the capital investment for putting in a thickener on the process plant. We've made the capital investment to do some res dev drilling in the underground and putting in increases of power, increases of ventilation, which will then get us through this transitional period and then take us through to ready for the ore sorter if all the test work and the like finalizes and confirms exactly what the initial test work has stated. And once we get to that point, then we become a operating company with a revenue of 24 more or less 24 million pounds per annum. So that is who we are. We think that it's a wonderfully revenue producing asset. But again, we're not going to stop there. We are going to, if possible, move some of our funds over into exploration programs. Firstly, starting in around the Cononishe vein, testing some of the theories of what we think and what we heavily believe, that the Cononishe vein continues but moves off to the left. And then if we do understand that and actually see what we think we're going to see and increase our resource first up to over the 500,000, and then can produce mine plans and access it and get it into a reserve, into a mine, then hey presto, maybe our mine will then continue on for many more years than the current 9-year mine life. And lastly, but not which we haven't probably talked about enough, is the fact that we are the first Scottish gold mine. Now, that means many things to many people, but it means that we are producing gold and we are the only ones who produce gold. And that's a significant step. We can possibly do all sorts of things with this as a result. And we'll probably talk more about that going forward. I just wanted to repeat that we are the only gold mine in Scotland, and that is a thing. Right, so Sean Duffy here is with me today. I think, Sean, you're going to start to take over and take some questions because that's the end of the presentation.
Yeah, so well, I think I'll just add just on that the position we're in at the moment, obviously it can change on a dime, as you know, in mining, and what we had previously versus where we are at the moment and where we're going forward. A whole different, all game creditors are coming down. We're paying for, we paid pretty much for the thickener. All these initiatives that we do just builds cash. So I think that will set us up really well for the second half of this year and growing into next year. But we're certainly a mining company now, so it's really good to see and a really good update, Phil. So what we'll do is I'll hand back to we'll take a short break, 30 seconds I believe, and then I'll just go through these questions that have been submitted. I'll read them out and then we'll see how we can answer them.
Okay.
Phil, Sean, thank you very much for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just using the Q&A tab situated in the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review those questions submitted today, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. As you can see, we've received a number of questions throughout today's presentation, and thank you to all the investors for submitting those. But Sean, could I just ask you to read out those questions and then give responses where it's appropriate to do so, and then I'll pick up from you both at the end.
Yep, no problem, will do. So I'll get straight into it. I think there was a pre-submitted question, which is a bit of a theme because there's another one on this that's been submitted, so I'll answer the two. This one's, with the extra revenue generated from the increased production and sales, will the board please consider paying a dividend, even if it's a small one? So just on that, so dividends in general, we've really, this first quarter, as you saw from the graphs before, that last quarter two that we just had has really just set us up to launch forward. It's a little bit premature right now to say let's pay a dividend, but the discussion will be there. And what I can say is that the board are the biggest shareholders, so I think it would be in their interest to say yes, let's pay a dividend. But I think what we need to do really is look at these growth options that we do. In any board discussion, it's always a case of, okay, what do we do next? We're generating cash. Do we employ that cash to expand the resource and the reserve and explore to give us growth opportunities? Do we then make sure that we've got more than enough money to pay our debt, which we can manage going forward with our forward cash flows? Do we then look at a dividend? So I think it's more a question for that will come up later this year for next year. Not to say that I'm committing to a dividend next year, but I think the discussion has to be that as we build our cash, do we do it? When do we do it? What I can say is that in my view, in my experience, once you do pay a dividend, you've got to keep paying a dividend, and we've just got to make sure that we get a few more runs under our belt, build up a bit more cash, get our plans to the growth phase, and then really ask that question of the board and put it to, where do we do it? But I can certainly say that it is something that will be discussed at most board meetings, yes.
Excellent.
So second one, Phil, this would be for you. On a previous podcast, you mentioned that you'd found gold within the mine that wasn't supposed to be there. Does this mean that you've been processing gold that's not part of the resource model? And do you expect to find a lot more gold than the existing resource?
Well, that's a very eluding question. So obviously, as we're going through, we did encounter some faults that had some much higher grade gold than we anticipated. So that gold certainly wouldn't have been predicted within our resource model. And yes, we have taken that, and it's probably what helped us somewhat. But again, that was only a few days of total of the quarter. I guess probably more clearly explaining that is as we have gone through certain areas, it's clear that the signs of the gold continues on in certain ways that we don't fully understand. And as we continue to open up the mine, we'll understand more and more. But it's starting to show signs that, yes, it does continue on into areas that we don't understand yet. But we haven't accessed those areas. It's only in the areas that we've had much higher gold grades than we originally thought that's been taken or processed.
Great, thanks. Next one I'll take. It says, can you explain exactly what the debt is and to who? And again, given the current production and revenue, how and when will this be paid down? Right. So initially, the pre-existing loan that we have consists of £9.5 million, which is a combination of Bridge Barn, which is one of our directors, Nat LaRue, is directly associated with, as per our accounts that's in there, and then another. So that's 9.5 million in total, including a loan from another director. The Fernwealth loan is £2 million at this stage, and that basically, so 11.5 million in total. The first repayment of these loans will start in Q3 2023 next year. And that's the Bridge Barn loan, and that's per the schedule, which again is listed in their accounts. So that will be paid down from 23, and then 24 is so it'll be May 2024 for the Fernwealth loan, and then the balance of the existing 9.5 million loan, the balance of that will go through 24 and 25. is where it is. So the existing production and revenue will be building. We're paying the interest on time, and we pay that down as we go. But the actual loan repayments will be making sure that we, again, back to that dividend question, making sure that we can cover our debt repayments, cover our development and exploration, and also then cover our loan, all of our loan commitments as they come due. So at this stage, the production and revenue is on track, and our forecast is building enough cash so that we can cover that and cover these investment and growth expenditures as well. So far, it's looking very good. So yeah, don't have any problems with that. So yeah, that's that one. Okay, we have another question. When can Sheila and Martin Fleet expect some more gold for jewellery production? That's one for you, Phil.
Right. So it's a difficult question to answer because of some of the technical issues that we'd adhered in the mine. We're working hard to try to get some more gold from our gravity areas. We, as of this last week, we have sent some more off for refining. So I don't have the full answer on that, but all I can say is we are working to try to understand where that type of gold exists within the mine. If I go back to the original mine plan itself, where I showed you the grey area that we'd mined, it's just across the whole lot of the face. As a total proportion of the overall mine, it represents a very little amount, but that's all we understand because that's all we've developed. I fully expect as we start to get more into those reds areas, as on the mine plan itself, when we've had the upgrade in the ventilation and upgrade in the power, we will get more and more understanding of our grade control. We'll also get much better understanding of the type of gold and which form it is. So once our understanding becomes better, then it becomes more predicted on how we run the gravity circuit. Once we understand that and the connectivity to the mine plan, then we can actually understand very, very well how much gravity gold we can produce. And then from that, we'll be able to have some decent conversations with people who want to purchase the gravity gold. So still got a long way to go to really fully understand that and be able to become more predictive and therefore be able to understand how much is going to be produced.
Great, thanks, Phil. I've got two questions. I'll just combine them. One is, this is for you as well, Phil. What is the lead time on the ore sorter? And also, are there any plans to allow investor visits to the mine site?
For the ore sorter itself, there are ore sorters that we believe are potentially available to us, so we don't actually have to purchase one off the vendors themselves. So we are analysing that to see if that can be true or not. But if we do purchase one directly from the vendors themselves, it's probably around about a 6-month delivery time, I would imagine. What was the second question? Second question was about investor visits to the site. That is potential something interest now that we've just been able to announce commercial production. Let us come back to you on exactly some of the specifics on how we would conceive to do that in the latter part of this year.
Yeah, fair enough. Just the last one here I have, unless any more come through, but this one here. Do you have any intentions to expand your exploration activities before where it sits today? So that's quite a straightforward answer, I believe.
Of course it is. Absolutely. It's yes, of course. So name of the game, as I talked about and I've spoken about ad nauseum, I guess, since the AGM of this year, is we want you to get to this particular position where, we're a running entity and we're in commercial production and we don't actually have to go out to the market and actually ask for money and the like, unless it's for very specific growth purpose and the like. So we've achieved that. That is no easy feat. It is, and it's a thing about the people that we've employed, that they've been able to do it so fast and so readily. So extremely happy to be able to be here in the meetings like this to be able to say that. But that's step one, okay? So once we've got to the step one phase now, yes, it's a time of consolidation, get ready into phase two to get more and more revenue, but at the same time, go step to the side and actually enhance our exploration activities and get set ready for this year and into 2023. So yes, we're starting that work at pace.
Great. I have another one here, a question that's just popped up. So hedging, have you hedged future production percentage, and have you answered this? So at this stage, no, we have a straight offtake with MRI, and we sell our concentrate without any hedged production or any hedged price. and that for the immediate future, that's where we'll stay. So that's quite a straightforward one. That's that. I don't have any other questions.
No, Phil, Sean, thank you very much for that. I think you've actually managed to address all those questions from investors, and of course, the company will review those questions submitted, and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to you both, Phil, could I just ask you for a few closing comments?
Yeah, sure, no problems. With pleasure. So repeating, I guess, the same thing I keep talking about at every interview and every AGM or every webinar. We value doing work at SCOTGOLD where we take the time to understand things properly. We do things properly. We make sure everybody understands to the best of their ability. Then when we say we're going to do something, then we go off and do it. We're not always perfect, but we achieve and we have achieved success through this methodology. As a result, some of the metrics that are important in mining companies, like the availability of equipment, the availability of process plant, the availability of machines in the underground, are all now up into world-class areas, which means a wonderful thing for the way that our people have approached this. That at the same time, our geology is starting to show us that it's got more gold in areas that we didn't think. We're opening up the mine. If that continues on, it just means we're going to have, much more gold per unit of ore than when we anticipate. But we're not going to plan on that. We're going to just extend the mine or develop in the mine as fast as we possibly can to make sure that we get as much of that through the process plant, because that then equals revenue. And the more revenue that we can get with our cost base being so high fixed, it just means we have more profitability. And with more profitability, it means we can start to pay back our debts as we need to, and means we can put money into growth as required. And then once we get into that position, then yes, we can hopefully answer all these questions about dividends and the like, because we do want to pay back to our investors as best as we possibly can, but we just at the same time want to set the company up for success, and we don't want to leave anything to chance. So that's what we're doing, and hopefully that our investors and everyone are behind us and believe in us. So thank you very much for your time.
Phil, Sean, thank you very much for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, and I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company.
Nice.
On behalf of the management team of ScotGold Resources Limited, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good afternoon to you all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Cheers.